Good morning, Seahawks, and welcome to another interview with an artist. My name is Amy Covington, and I currently serve as the 2021 to 2022 Bozeman Gallery intern for Campus Life. I work to ensure that operations in and around the Anne Flack Bozeman Gallery run smoothly so that we can bring you, our students, staff, and local community, wonderful shows by our students, alumni, and local artists. From now until November 4th, our featured show is by our very own UNCW alumnus, Bryan Braswell. His show, I Met God, Did You Know She Was Black, plays with the ideas of religious iconography, fame, spirituality, and pop art. His style can best be described as sharp yet playful and employing the use of vibrant and bold imagery. So hi, Bryan. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to sit down with me, and I'm excited to talk about your show.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, of course. So I have a list of questions for you, and we can just go ahead and jump right in.
Let's go for it.
So the first question I have is, where did the inspiration for this collection of work come from?
Yeah, no, I really appreciate that. So the inspiration for this set of work came from recently, well, not recently, but for the past 10 years, I've lived in New York City. And there you see a lot of kind of like pop art, street art, and what's called like culture jamming. And I always kind of find that art just super, super intriguing. I love that style of things. But also I'm low-key obsessed with memes, and I just find like memes hilarious. And I saw this one meme one time of it was a meme of Beyonce as Jesus, and I just thought it was really, really funny. And then I was like, there could be something here. So I started kind of like playing with like sketches and things like that. And just like, okay, what if we did like this, or what if we kind of moved these around? But just that idea of kind of that meme inspired the exhibit.
Yeah, awesome. Sweet. So my next question I have for you is, what does the process for these pieces look like? And do you typically work from photographs for your work? I mean, I'm guessing that for these, you didn't have Beyonce casually there to model for you.
Yeah, so the process for these pieces, it's a little bit different. So what I did was, with the first one, I kind of started with like a proof of concept. So I found kind of a photo image that kind of conveyed what I wanted to convey, but at the same time, I worked with the image of like the individual and then the background, and then kind of like spliced the two. So the background stylistically was the same for all of them. Just there's a couple slight differences between each of them, whether that be color or the actual like symbols in the background. So I wanted to kind of keep that consistent across the board. But with the imagery for the individuals in the foreground, I wanted to kind of play with those. So I actually looked at different kind of like stained glass windows from like various churches and cathedrals to see if there was just like interesting imagery that kind of like jumped out to me, and to pair those with the images of the individuals and artists that I felt kind of like mashed up the best. And once those two kind of like mashed and I found like the right fit for both, I was like, okay, this one's done. I'm okay to move on to the next. But yeah, so I kind of started from there with the background imagery and like how I want to do that and kind of keep that the same stylistically, and then kind of like found that the image that kind of conveyed a similar emotion to that of the images in those stained glass windows, and then kind of paired them with like the body types of the individuals and kind of like the robe motif of that's kind of seen throughout those stained glass window images.
Awesome. Yeah, I really love that. So that leads me to my next question, which is, so all of the pieces in your show are acrylic. So is acrylic your preferred medium, or do you have any other mediums that you like to work in as well?
Yeah, so with this show in particular, I kind of kept it acrylic on canvas as kind of experimentation. I've seen some acrylic on canvas achieve the look that I was going for, similarly to just kind of like that pop art style, and just be able to paint very flat and consistently. But I've also kind of been experimenting on my own, and I've seen some of that happen with spray paint. Spray paint's a little bit more difficult to control, and you're not able to get as clean edges as you like, and as I wanted to kind of like have for this exhibit in particular. But Yeah, so typically I work with acrylic on canvas. I have other styles, like this style is kind of simplistic and like drawn down because there's so many pieces. But I've done a lot of portraits that are typical, just like acrylic blending, where it's like made to look more like photorealistic and things like that. So it kind of all depends on the piece or the medium or just kind of like the image and like what I'm trying to convey with the painting. Of how I go about using the acrylics, but I just chose like a very like bold and simple style with these acrylics, just because I want to kind of mirror that street art kind of look with these pieces. But I think if I were to experiment again, I think I would try kind of spray paint on canvas, and I've been kind of learning a little bit from a guy who does spray paint on canvas really, really well, just to kind of mimic his techniques and execution to achieve the looks I want to achieve.
Sweet, awesome. Spray paint is no joke. It's so hard to control,
Very much so.
but awesome. So that also brings me to my next question, which is, so you did talk about how you're inspired by like pop art and street art, and you can definitely see that like in your whole show. So can you talk a little bit about what drew you to these specific styles and just what you like about it in particular?
Yeah. So I think with like pop art and street art, it's very bold and very simple because it wants to convey something almost like loudly. Like when I see like, graffiti on a subway train, there's almost like a sound as you see that graffiti like passing you, right? Like visually, it almost creates like a sound effect. But with other types of like pop art or street art, I think it's just very, like I said, just very visually appealing and just conveys something very boldly and simply. Growing up, one of my favorite cartoons was Daria, and just the humor in it was like always hilarious. And I was, a teenager when it came out, preteen probably when it came out. But I just always also a thing about the show that was always appealing to me is just like the art style in Daria was super, super appealing to me. It just, they use like thick, bold lines for everything. And it wasn't like super, super detailed, but you can still like communicate and everything was conveyed. And it was just like kind of clear. So I like that style. Some of the other artists that I draw inspiration from, but seeing that same style is like Lichtenstein, with his like famous pop art works. There's another pop artist whose work I came across in New York called Burton Morris. His stuff is phenomenal. It has almost kind of like a 1920s or 30s kind of like ad feel to it. But he achieves that pop art look so seamlessly. But like I said, I just like being able to communicate in a very bold way visually with the pieces that I do. As you can see, even in the background, I have a lot of propaganda art. And I love that same kind of style with just like communicating that, often complex and deep messages very simply with like as little as possible. Yeah, just the bold visualization of like that imagery is always very like stark to me.
Yeah, awesome, definitely. And I think that that bold imagery also kind of like works to draw people into the gallery, because we've definitely like, I'll be like standing in there and we'll see people walking by and it'll like strike them just because it's so like bold and striking, and they'll like come in and be like, oh, like what is this show? So definitely super cool. So that brings me to the next question, which is how would you say that your education and even your time at UNCW has helped you in your career as an artist?
So that's actually kind of the interesting part. So I graduated from UNCW in 2008 with my bachelor's, in 2010 with my master's, but neither of them had nothing to do with art. Neither of them had anything to do with art. My undergrad degree was in history and my grad degree was in public administration. And for the longest, I thought I was gonna go to law school or work in politics or something like that. But the funny thing was all my art background is all from like high school and before that. I did like AP art in high school and things like that. And the funny thing is, even my 6 years at UNCW, I very rarely picked up a paintbrush or a pencil. I think I took one like fundamentals of drawing class, like as a summer class, just to get extra credit. And it just kind of reminded me, I was like, hey, you do have this skill set. You can draw back upon this whenever you want to. So yeah, it was the interesting thing. Yeah, so my time at UNCW, I remember like I did some graphic design. Like I was very involved on campus. I was in a fraternity. I was in Panhellenic. I was an RA, things like that. But I remember designing like flyers for events and those kind of things. But I distinctly I hadn't touched a paintbrush in a really really long time. Prior to maybe like 4 or 5 years ago. To when I started like doing these works. But the funny thing though that I've learned kind of about UNCW, and I guess your, I guess like formal education versus well, I don't want to say like on the job training, but like doing the thing. I used to work with high school students, and it was a mentoring program about like college counseling. And the thing that I would always tell them about it is your college degree is essentially a driver's license, and you can take that license wherever you want to go. It's saying that you have the skill sets and have completed the necessary training to do this one thing, but you don't necessarily have to do that, take that to do one thing. So I say that to say, don't ever box yourself in by what your degree is in, what you feel like you have formal training in. I know people with degrees and things that do outstanding and amazing work in fields that they are not formally trained for. And I think too often people conflate that formal training and what your degree is in to what you're good at and what your calling is. Those can be very two different things. And I think my, even just, you know, what I find passion in and what I like doing in my free time is very, very separate from what I'm, you know, quote unquote qualified to do by my degrees, by my education.
Yeah, I love that so much. I feel like that needs to be preached more into our society.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, I have another question for you, and that is, what did you find challenging about these works in particular? And maybe you can talk a little bit about like how you were able to overcome those challenges.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think with a show like this and just the style I was working in, it can get super repetitive. And it can get to a point where everything kind of looks the same. So even amongst the pieces, keeping like kind of the same background thematically, working in the same color palette, I tried to switch things up and vary them a lot. So all the pieces have their own kind of distinct look, which can be difficult. I've been to exhibits that are like amazing and people working on huge canvases, but where there's, it almost kind of feels a bit monotonous, where it's like not varied enough, kind of just like piece to piece. So that was the hardest thing, is just trying to figure out like, okay, this is a new piece, what's distinctly different and like makes this one photographically different from like another one. It gets kind of hard when you're working with like so many of them in, like I said, in that same color palette, but you kind of find places and things where you can like, okay, I can do this differently with this one, or I can, you know, kind of paint like the eyes in a different style on this one, or like inverse colors or like things like that. So just by keeping kind of like the same motifs everywhere. So I think that would probably be the biggest challenge, is like differentiation with these.
Yeah, awesome. Well, that leads me to my next question, which is, do you have a favorite piece from this show?
All of them, they're all my favorites. No, it's yeah, no, I had these on display in a gallery in New York, actually right prior to the pandemic. And a couple of them sold a bit more, but the ones that or got more attention from folks, but yeah, the ones that I thought were kind of like primed to be, had the most like best reception, weren't those. So it's kind of, it's, yeah, to me it's always kind of like in the eye of the beholder. So but yeah, I love them all.
Awesome. Well, so my last question for you is, what's one thing that you hope that people coming to the gallery and seeing your show for the first time, what's one thing that you hope that they take away from your show?
Mm. One thing I hope folks take away from my show is, I think, realizing the beauty, spirituality, and divinity of things that are sometimes seen as, I don't want to say, um, things that necessarily aren't reserved for, reserved in that space, right? Like people think about certain types of art and it being like almost like what I want to say like boxed in. So perfect example is like the song that inspires you the most might not be an inspirational song, but it's how that thing makes you feel. So let's say there's a song that's, subject matter is like not about anything inspirational, but if it inspires you to get up every day, if it inspires you to like think and challenge yourself, um like then it is an inspirational song because it's about the effect that it has. And the thing that I want people to realize is that um kind of always look deeper into things about the look deeper into things and analyze the effect they may have, and look at um analyze like kind of like beauty and find things, learn to appreciate things and find things that are beautiful in places and in spaces that typically aren't reserved as such.
Yeah, awesome. I love that so much. So is there anything that I may have missed that you want to share with the viewers at home? Anything that you just want to put out there?
Yeah, no, I just really, once again, I just truly thankful for the opportunity. I think also just kind of back to my time at UNCW, not even being an art major, I just feel honored and blessed that someone, was interested in my work and wanted to put it on display on campus. Even not being a part of that space while I was at the university. And just for, any students watching this, I would say just maximize your time at UNCW. If there's something you want to learn about, don't ever think that like, oh, this is my major, I can only take classes in this, I can only learn about this thing. Learn about everything that you want to. And life is just about life is about like lifelong learning. Post graduation, I've learned more. I feel like I've learned more almost than I did in my time at UNCW, just because I choose to continually surround and immerse myself in new things. So just to that point, just take it like there are a lot of amazing connections, a lot of amazing people you'll meet, including my former supervisor, who's now director of campus life, Mr. Larry Ray, who just make sure that you just immerse yourself in those opportunities while you're at UNCW. I don't take those interactions for granted, because there's a lot of value and there's a lot to learn from everyone that you come in contact with in your time at UNCW. And just the breadth of experiences that you're allowed to have as a college student, whether that be studying abroad, whether that be internships, whether that be just taking in classes. Like there's no other time in your life that you'll be able to just take 4 years, do nothing, pay no bills, and learn about anything and everything you want to learn about and have it at your disposal, a 10-minute bike ride away from where you sleep at night. I always I never want to say it's like those are the best years of your life. It's not the best years, they're formative years in your life. But make sure you're taking the most out of every opportunity that you have while you're there, because ultimately you're paying for it. You're a customer. So, like I'm very picky when I order food. And that's just, a $10 sandwich. You're paying thousands of dollars as a college student. So get picky. Like you're just like, hey, I'm paying for this degree. I'm paying for this education. I want to learn about X. Teach me about X. You should definitely come out of UNCW just kind of understanding things you've always wanted to understand. And the other part of that, I think, like kind of like looking, holding up a mirror internally and just asking yourself, what do I want to be better at? What do I want to learn about? What things interest me? What things entice me? But also just take your time while you're there to make space and do those things. Don't hold yourself to a time schedule of saying like, oh, I have to graduate in 4 years. No, I mean, that the value of what you'll have out if you take longer to learn more, it's completely invaluable. So I would say just make the most of your time there, and demand what you want out of your educational experience.
Yeah, very well said. That's some really good advice. Well, thank you so much, Bryan, for joining me here today.
No, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to sit down with me and talk about your awesome show. So I'll go ahead and let you go. Thank you so much again.
Go Seahawks.